3 years ago, I buried my wife. Her name was Jack Morrison, and if you'd met her once, you probably would have remembered her forever. She wasn't loud. She wasn't the kind of person who needed to be the center of attention. But she had this way of making everyone around her feel like they'd known her for years. She could spend an hour talking to a stranger at a gas station about old pickup trucks, homemade barbecue sauce, or why nobody built reliable engines anymore. Somehow, people always walked away smiling. To me, she was home. We were married for 34 years. In all that time, we never became rich, never owned a vacation house, never traveled outside the country. Our biggest luxury was a little two-bay repair shop on the edge of Springfield, Missouri. It wasn't much to look at. The paint on the walls was peeling. The office coffee tasted like burnt dirt. The sign out front leaned a little farther every winter. But every bolt, every toolbox, and every lift inside that shop had a story. Most of them involved Diane. She wasn't officially a mechanic, but after 3 decades of watching me rebuild engines, she'd become better than half the guys who came through my shop asking for jobs. She could identify an engine problem just by listening to it idle. She knew exactly which wrench I'd misplaced before I even started looking for it. And every Saturday morning she'd walk in carrying 2 coffees and say the same thing. So, what are we fixing today? Looking back, I think those Saturdays were the happiest days of my life. Our son Tyler grew up in that garage. By the time he was 10, he could change brake pads. By 15, he was rebuilding carburetors. Unlike me, though, Tyler loved the business side of cars, buying them, selling them, finding rare classics before anyone else did. He always joked that I fixed cars because I loved them. He sold them because everyone else did. Diane used to laugh and say, "Together we made one complete mechanic." Maybe she was right. 6 months before she died, Diane came home with an idea. I found one. I looked up from the kitchen table. Found what? The car. She slid a faded photograph across the table. It showed a neglected 1970s Chevelle SS sitting behind an old barn. The marina blue paint had almost disappeared beneath years of dust. One headlight was missing. The interior looked like squirrels had claimed it as their vacation home. Most people would have called it junk. Diane smiled. "Isn't she beautiful?" I laughed. "Beautiful isn't exactly the word I'd use. That's because you only see what it is." She tapped the picture. "I see what it could be." 3 days later, the Chevelle was sitting in our garage. The restoration became our project. Every Saturday we'd work on one small piece. One weekend we'd rebuild the suspension. The next, we'd restore the dashboard. Sometimes we'd spend 6 straight hours cleaning one chrome bumper until it reflected like a mirror. People thought we were restoring a classic car. To us, it became something else, a reason to spend time together before life got busy again. Except, life never got busy again. Instead, Diane got sick. At first it seemed harmless. She'd come home tired. Then she'd start forgetting little things. She insisted it was stress. I wanted to believe her. The doctors didn't. A month later, they told us it was an aggressive form of cancer. I don't remember much from that appointment. Just the silence afterward. The kind of silence that settles into your chest and refuses to leave. Driving home, neither of us spoke. Halfway there, Diane reached across the truck and squeezed my hand. "Don't spend whatever time I've got left feeling sorry for me." I nodded. "I'll try." She smiled. "No. Promise me." "I promise." She never stopped working on the Chevelle, even during chemotherapy. Even when climbing into the driver's seat left her exhausted, she refused to quit. "If I stop now," she told me one afternoon, "I'll never finish her." "You can rest. I'll finish it." She looked at me like I'd said something ridiculous. "No. We finish it. Together." That was Diane. Everything was together. The car was completed 2 weeks before she passed away. The marina blue paint looked like liquid glass beneath the garage lights. The chrome sparkled. The rebuilt 454 engine purred so smoothly you could balance a coin on top of it while it idled. Diane walked around the Chevelle 3 times without saying a word. Finally, she rested her hand on the driver's door. We did good. I smiled. We sure did. Then she looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Serious, almost worried. Jack, if anything ever happens to me, don't sell this car. I laughed. Who's buying it? I'm serious. I know. No matter what anyone offers. Promise me. I frowned. Why? She hesitated, then smiled again. Because it's ours. That answer felt incomplete, but I didn't push. I simply nodded. I promise. She wrapped her arms around me. For a long time, neither of us spoke. I had no idea. That would be the last promise I'd ever make to her. Diane died 12 days later. The funeral was small, just family, friends, customers who'd known her for years. Even people whose cars she'd only ridden in once showed up. That's the kind of person she was. After everyone left. I sat alone in the garage. The Chevelle sat under a cover, exactly where we'd parked it. I couldn't bring myself to look at it, not for weeks. Every time I walked into the shop, it reminded me she wasn't coming back. Eventually, I stopped uncovering it altogether. Life became routine. Work, home, sleep, repeat. Tyler kept telling me I needed to move forward. I kept pretending I already had. 3 years passed that way. Until one Tuesday afternoon, Tyler walked into the office holding his phone. Dad, you busy? Always. He sat across from me. I got an offer. For what? The Chevelle. My stomach tightened. What did you tell them? I told them no. I nodded. Good. Then he looked uncomfortable. It wasn't just an offer. What do you mean? The guy said he'll pay whatever we ask. Everyone has a number. He said he doesn't care what the number is. That got my attention. How much are we talking? He started at $200,000. I nearly laughed. For a restored Chevelle? Tyler nodded, and he sounded disappointed when I said no. Who is he? Didn't say. Dealer? I don't think so. I leaned back in my chair. Something about it didn't feel right. The next morning, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. A man in an expensive charcoal suit stepped out, mid-50s, perfect haircut, perfect smile. The kind of man who looked like he'd never gotten grease under his fingernails. He walked into my shop as if he'd been there before. Mr. Morrison? That's me. He extended his hand. My name is Michael Dawson. I believe your son mentioned my interest in your Chevelle. I believe he also told you it isn't for sale. He smiled politely. I don't mind waiting. I'm not asking you to. I understand. No, I said. I don't think you do. His smile never faded. I can offer $500,000. Every wrench stopped turning. Every mechanic in the shop looked at us. $500,000. For one car. I slowly shook my head. It isn't about the money. So I've heard. He reached into his jacket and placed a business card on my desk. People often change their minds. I didn't even look at it. I'm not people. He nodded once. As you wish. Then he turned and walked away. Just before climbing into his SUV, he glanced toward the covered Chevelle. Not like a collector, not like a buyer, like a man checking whether something valuable was still exactly where he'd left it. That's when the feeling hit me, a feeling I couldn't explain. He didn't want the car. He wanted something inside it. At the time, I had no idea how right I was. After Michael Dawson left, the shop stayed quiet for several minutes. Nobody picked up a wrench. Nobody turned on an engine. Even the old radio in the office seemed too loud. Finally, my employee Rick looked over at me. Jack, did that guy really offer $500,000? I nodded. He sure did. Rick laughed. I've seen restored Chevelles sell for good money. But not that kind of money. Not even close. Neither of us said another word, because we were both thinking the same thing. Something wasn't right. That evening, Tyler and I pulled the cover off the Chevelle. The marina blue paint still looked flawless. 3 years had passed since Diane and I finished restoring it, yet it looked exactly as it had the day we rolled it out of the garage. Tyler slowly walked around it. You think we missed something? What do you mean? Maybe it's a rare factory option, a matching numbers engine, something collectors would kill for. I smiled. Son, I built half this car with my own hands. If there was anything special about it, I'd know. Tyler shrugged. Then why is someone offering 500 grand? I didn't have an answer. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. I called an old friend named Walter Jenkins. Walter had spent 40 years judging classic car competitions across the Midwest. If anyone could tell me whether our Chevelle was secretly worth a fortune, it was him. He arrived just after lunch carrying a toolbox that looked older than both of us. You finally decided to let me see this masterpiece. You've been asking for 3 years. And you've been making excuses for 3 years. He smiled. Diane would have never kept it from me. That made me grin. No. She probably would have called you the day we finished. Walter took nearly an hour inspecting every inch of the car. He checked casting numbers, paint codes, frame stamps, engine markings. When he finally stood up, he wiped his hands on an old shop rag. Well? I asked. He scratched his beard. She's beautiful. I know that, and she's worth good money. How much? Maybe 80. 80,000? He nodded. On a really good day. Tyler looked at me. So not 500. Walter laughed. Not even close. As Walter packed his tools, he suddenly stopped. What? I asked. He walked back toward the driver's side door. Something had caught his eye. He leaned inside the cabin, ran his fingers beneath the dashboard, then frowned. That's odd. What is? He pointed to one of the dashboard screws. Did you replace these? I don't think so. Walter looked closer. These aren't original. I shrugged. Maybe Diane changed them. He looked at me. Why would she? I honestly didn't know. During the restoration, Diane had insisted on handling certain parts herself, mostly the interior. At the time, I figured she simply enjoyed that part of the project. Now, I wasn't so sure. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about those screws. Around midnight, I walked back into the garage. The house was silent. Only the small work light above my bench illuminated the room. The Chevelle sat exactly where we'd left it. I climbed into the driver's seat. Walter was right. 4 dashboard screws looked newer than the others. Same size, same shape, but different finish. I grabbed a screwdriver, then stopped. Diane's voice echoed in my head. If you're going to take something apart, make sure you can put it back together. I smiled, still telling me what to do. Carefully, I removed the first screw, then the second, then the third. The dashboard loosened. I reached behind it. Nothing. Just wiring, heating ducts, old insulation. I laughed at myself. What are you doing, Jack? I started putting everything back together. Then my flashlight slipped from my hand. It rolled beneath the driver's seat. As I reached down to grab it, my fingers brushed against something taped to the underside of the seat. A small envelope, yellowed with age. My heartbeat quickened. Slowly, I peeled it free. Written across the front, in Diane's handwriting, were 2 words. For Jack. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a folded note. Nothing else. The paper smelled faintly of motor oil and lavender. I unfolded it. Jack, if you're reading this, it means someone came looking for the Chevelle. I stopped breathing. She knew. Years ago. She knew. I kept reading. First, don't panic. Second, don't tell anyone about this note. Not even Tyler. Especially not anyone offering to buy the car. A cold chill ran through me. How could she have known? The next line answered nothing. Instead, it created 100 new questions. There are things I couldn't tell you. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I loved you. I read that sentence 3 times. It didn't make sense. Why would loving me require keeping secrets? Then I reached the last paragraph. Someone will eventually ask for the car. When they do, call Walter. I frowned. Walter? He'd already been here today. I turned the page over. One final sentence was written on the back. Ask him about the coin. The coin? I had no idea what she meant. The next morning, Walter answered on the second ring. Morning, Jack. I found something. His voice immediately changed. What did you find? A note. Silence. Then, what did it say? It mentioned you. Another long pause. Finally, Walter sighed. I was hoping she'd never need to leave that. You know what this is about? I know part of it. What part? The part Diane allowed me to know. I stared out the garage window. What does that mean? It means, Walter said quietly, your wife had secrets. Before I could ask another question, a loud crash echoed from the shop floor. Someone shouted, Jack! I ran outside. The front garage door hung halfway off its tracks. A black pickup had smashed straight through it. Smoke poured from the engine. The driver jumped out and sprinted toward the Chevelle. He wasn't trying to steal tools or money. He was running straight for the car. Rick tackled him before he made it halfway across the shop. The 2 men crashed into a stack of tires. Another mechanic grabbed his legs. Within seconds, 4 of us had him pinned to the floor. The stranger fought like a man possessed. He kept yelling the same thing over and over. Where is it? Where did you hide it? Rick punched him in the shoulder. What are you talking about? The man ignored him. His eyes stayed locked on the Chevelle, as if nothing else in the room mattered. A few minutes later, the sheriff's deputies arrived. They dragged the man outside in handcuffs. One deputy walked over to me. You know this guy? I shook my head. Never seen him before. The deputy nodded. We'll figure out who sent him. I watched as they loaded the man into the patrol car. Just before the door closed, he looked directly at me, then smiled. It wasn't the smile of someone who'd failed. It was the smile of someone who knew. Someone else was already coming. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the old house made me think someone was outside. Every passing set of headlights made me glance through the window. The stranger's words kept replaying in my mind. Where is it? He never asked for the Chevelle. He asked for it. Whatever it was. He believed it was hidden inside the car. And somehow, Diane had known someone would come looking. The next morning, Walter pulled into my driveway before sunrise. He stepped out carrying a weathered metal toolbox. No smile, no small talk, just business. You got the note? I handed it to him. He read it once, then again. Finally, he folded it carefully and gave it back. I haven't seen her handwriting in years. You knew about this? I knew she'd leave you something, but not what she'd write. I leaned against the workbench. Walter. What exactly was Diane involved in? He took a long breath. I honestly don't know. You don't believe that. I know enough to stay alive. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. Walter set his toolbox on the hood of the Chevelle. Then he looked at me. She told you to ask about the coin. I nodded. What coin? Instead of answering, he opened the toolbox. Beneath old sockets and wrenches sat a small velvet pouch. He handed it to me. Inside was an old brass challenge coin, about the size of a silver dollar. One side showed a soaring falcon. The other had a simple engraving. 47. No company logo, no military insignia, nothing else. I turned it over in my hand. What is this? Walter smiled faintly. I've spent 6 years asking myself that same question. You've had it that long? Diane gave it to me. When? The week before she died. What did she tell you? Walter looked toward the Chevelle. She said if anyone ever came looking for the car, I was supposed to give you the coin. That's it? That's all she said. You never asked why? He laughed quietly. Of course I did. What did she say? Walter looked down. She said, the less you know, the longer you'll live. That sounded exactly like Diane. She always answered serious questions with calm confidence. Back then, I probably would have accepted it. Today, not a chance. Tyler arrived just as Walter was putting the coin away. He looked between us. What's going on? Walter quickly closed the toolbox. Just talking. Tyler frowned. About what? I remembered Diane's note. Don't tell anyone. Even Tyler. The words felt wrong. He was my son. I'd never kept secrets from him. But if Diane had gone out of her way to write that, she must have had a reason. I forced a smile. Walter's helping me check the suspension. Tyler looked unconvinced. Since when do you whisper about suspension? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. This is Jack. No response. Only breathing. Then, click. The call ended. 10 minutes later it rang again. Same unknown number. Again. Silence. Again. The caller hung up. Tyler looked at my phone. Spam? I don't think so. Walter didn't say anything, but I noticed him watching the road outside the shop, almost like he expected someone. Around lunchtime, Rick came into the office carrying a small package. This just got delivered. There wasn't a return address. The box was wrapped in plain brown paper. My name was written across the top, no stamp, no shipping label. Someone had dropped it off by hand. Tyler grabbed a utility knife. I'll open it. No. The word came out faster than I intended. He looked surprised. I've got it. Inside the box was an old cassette tape. Nothing else. Except a handwritten note. Play alone. Walter's face immediately changed. Don't. I looked at him. What? Not here. Why? Because if Diane wanted you alone, there's a reason. That evening, after everyone left, I locked the garage doors. The old cassette player still sat on a shelf in the office. I hadn't used it in years. I slid the tape inside, pressed play. Static filled the room. Then, Diane's voice. Clear, calm, exactly the way I remembered. Hi, Jack. I closed my eyes. For a second, it felt like she was standing beside me again. If you're hearing this, then things have started. She paused. I wish I could tell you everything. Believe me, I've wanted to for years. But if you're listening to this, it means I made the right decision. I frowned. What decision? The people looking for the Chevelle aren't collectors. They're looking for something they believe I stole. I didn't. I only hid it. A chill ran through me, so there really was something hidden. Jack, you're going to want to tear this car apart. Don't. Not yet. You'll only destroy the clues. I glanced toward the Chevelle sitting in the garage. Clues? First, find the place where we laughed the hardest while working on the car. Then the tape clicked. Stopped. That was it. No goodbye. No explanation. Just another clue. I sat there for nearly 15 minutes, trying to remember. The place where we laughed the hardest. The engine, the trunk, the seats, nothing stood out. Then, I remembered. The glove compartment. During the restoration, the old latch had jammed shut. For nearly an hour, Diane and I fought with it. When it finally popped open, a family of mice ran out. She laughed so hard she dropped her coffee all over the garage floor. I hadn't heard her laugh like that in years. I walked straight to the Chevelle, opened the passenger door. The glove compartment opened smoothly. Nothing inside. Just the owner's manual, registration papers, an old pair of driving gloves. I started to close it, then noticed something unusual. The inside lining looked newer than the rest of the compartment, almost as if someone had replaced the fabric. Carefully, I slid my fingers behind it. The liner lifted away. Hidden behind it was a tiny brass key, smaller than a house key. Attached to it was a faded paper tag. Only 3 words were written on it: Wilson's Diner. The next morning, Walter stared at the key. Wilson's? You know it? He nodded. Best pie in Greene County. I've eaten there. So have I. Then why would Diane hide a key for it? Walter slowly smiled. Because she wanted you to go there. Tyler looked confused. A key to a diner? Before anyone could answer, Rick came running in from the garage. Jack! What now? You need to see this. We stepped outside, parked across the street. Was the same black SUV Michael Dawson had driven 2 days earlier, only this time, he wasn't alone. 3 more black SUVs were parked behind him. Dawson stood beside his vehicle with his hands in his pockets, watching the shop, not moving, not speaking, just waiting, almost as if he already knew. I'd found the key. Michael Dawson and his men stayed across the street for nearly an hour. They never stepped out of their SUVs, never approached the shop. They simply watched. Every time I glanced out the office window, Dawson was standing there with the same calm expression, like a man who already knew how the story would end. Finally, just before noon, the SUVs drove away. Tyler let out a slow breath. That guy gives me the creeps. He should, Walter replied. He isn't acting like a car buyer. I looked at the brass key resting on my desk. He already knows we're looking. Walter nodded. Then we'd better stay one step ahead. We decided to wait until the next morning before going to Wilson's Diner. If Dawson had been watching us, there was no point leading him straight there. That night, I locked the Chevelle inside the garage and parked my pickup across the entrance. It felt ridiculous. Who steals a car from inside a repair shop? But this wasn't about stealing the car anymore. It was about whatever Diane had hidden, or whatever everyone believed she'd hidden. The next morning, I left before sunrise. Walter insisted on driving separately. If someone's following you, he said, I want to know. Tyler wanted to come too. I almost said yes. Then I remembered Diane's note. Don't tell anyone. Even Tyler. The words still didn't make sense, but every clue she'd left had turned out to be real. I couldn't ignore this one. I'm just grabbing breakfast, I told him. You want me to bring you something back? He smiled. Apple pie. You got it. I hated lying to him, but I kept hearing Diane's voice in my head. Trust me. Wilson's Diner looked exactly as it had 20 years earlier. Chrome trim, red vinyl booths, a neon sign that buzzed even in daylight. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee hit me the moment I walked inside. The place was almost empty. Just an older couple by the window and a truck driver reading the newspaper. A waitress carrying a coffee pot walked over. She looked to be in her early 60s, gray hair tied into a ponytail. Friendly smile. Morning. What can I get you? I smiled. Coffee. And a slice of apple pie. She laughed. Breakfast of champions. As she poured my coffee, I placed the brass key on the counter. I'm hoping you can tell me what this opens. She glanced at it. Her smile disappeared. Only for a second. Then it came back. You must be Jack. Every muscle in my body tightened. You know who I am? She nodded. Diane said you'd eventually come. She introduced herself as Linda. I've worked here almost 30 years. Diane used to stop by every Thursday. I frowned. Every Thursday? She told me she was helping organize charity car shows. Walter quietly looked at me. Neither of us had ever heard that story. Linda noticed our expressions. I take it she didn't tell you everything. No, I admitted. Apparently she didn't. Linda reached beneath the counter. She unlocked a small wooden cabinet, then removed a faded cigar box. She placed it on the table between us. Diane left this here 6 years ago. For me? For whoever brought that key. She pointed toward the brass key. You. Inside the cigar box was an old pocket watch, a folded road map, and another envelope. My name was written across the front. I laughed quietly. She really liked leaving letters. Linda smiled. She said you'd complain about that. I looked at her. She said that? Linda nodded. She knew you better than anyone. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single handwritten page. Jack, if Linda gave you this box, then you've started asking the right questions. I know you're probably angry with me. You have every right to be. But if I'd told you the truth while I was alive, you would have tried to protect me, and I couldn't let you do that. I stopped reading. My throat tightened. That sounded exactly like Diane, always worrying about everyone else, even at the end. I continued. The roadmap will lead you to the next clue. Don't unfold it until you're somewhere private. And whatever happens, don't trust the first answer you find. Before I could finish reading, the front door of the diner opened. The little bell above it chimed. Every instinct I had told me not to look, but I did anyway. Michael Dawson walked inside. Alone. He wasn't smiling this time. He spotted me immediately, then calmly walked toward our booth. Linda stepped between us. I'm sorry, sir. Table's closed. Dawson looked at her politely. I only need a minute. She didn't move. I said, table's closed. For the first time, his smile disappeared completely. You know who I am? Linda shrugged. No. And I don't care. He looked past her at me. Mr. Morrison, I think we're wasting each other's time. I'm not selling the car. I'm not here to buy it. Then why are you here? He looked down at the cigar box. I need what's inside. I slowly closed the lid. I don't think you do. His eyes narrowed. I've spent 6 years looking for that box. Walter stood up. I think you should leave. Dawson ignored him. Instead, he looked directly at me. Your wife made a mistake. I felt my temper rise. My wife didn't make many. This one cost her. The diner fell silent. Every customer had stopped eating. The truck driver slowly stood up. Not because he knew what was happening, because he sensed trouble. I took one step toward Dawson. What did you just say? He didn't flinch. I said, she should have told me where she hid it. Before I could react, Linda picked up the steaming coffee pot and dumped the entire thing across Dawson's expensive suit. He jumped backward. What the? You heard me. She pointed toward the door. Get out. The truck driver stepped beside Walter. So did I. The older man by the window stood too. You should leave, buddy. Dawson looked around. He realized he was suddenly outnumbered. He straightened his soaked jacket, then looked back at me. This isn't over. I answered quietly. I know. He walked out without another word. 10 minutes later, Walter locked the diner's front door. Linda looked through the window until Dawson's SUV disappeared down the highway. Only then did she sit back down. Her hands were shaking. I stared at her. You know who he is. She nodded. Unfortunately. Then tell me. She looked at the road map inside the cigar box, then back at me. I will. But not here. She leaned closer and lowered her voice. Because if Dawson found this place, it means someone betrayed Diane. The words hit me like a punch. What are you saying? Linda took a slow breath. I'm saying, your wife never worked alone. Linda didn't say another word until the diner was empty. The truck driver paid his bill and left. The older couple quietly walked out without asking questions. Walter flipped the sign on the front door from open to closed. Only then did Linda return to our booth. She poured herself a cup of coffee. Her hand still trembled slightly. I looked at her. You said Diane didn't work alone. Linda nodded. I did. Who was helping her? She looked out the window before answering. I don't know everyone's names, but I know there were 4 of us. I frowned. 4? Diane, Walter, myself, and one more person. Who? I never knew. I stared at Walter. You knew about this? He sighed. Only pieces. You didn't think this was important? I wasn't allowed to. Allowed by who? Walter looked directly at me. By Diane. He rubbed both hands together before continuing. She split everything into pieces. No one knew the whole story. Why? So if one of us got caught, the others stayed safe. Linda nodded. She called it compartmentalization. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. For 34 years, I thought I knew my wife. Now it felt like I was meeting a stranger. Linda slid the folded road map toward me. Go ahead. I slowly unfolded it. It was an old Missouri highway map, probably 20 years old. At first glance, nothing looked unusual. Then I noticed tiny circles drawn in blue ink. One circled Wilson's diner. Another marked our repair shop. Another pointed to an abandoned grain mill nearly 40 miles outside Springfield. There were 6 circles altogether, each connected by faint pencil lines, almost like a route. Walter leaned closer. Diane made this? Linda nodded. About 6 years ago. I traced the route with my finger. What happens at the grain mill? Linda looked at me. I don't know. You've never been? No. Why not? Because Diane told me never to. I folded the map and slipped it into my jacket. I'm going. Walter immediately shook his head. Not today. Why not? Because Dawson knows you have the map. He doesn't know what's on it. He doesn't have to. Linda agreed. If he's been looking for this box for 6 years, he'll be watching every road out of town. She was right. If Dawson had found the diner, he probably expected me to leave with another clue. Walking straight into it would be exactly what he wanted. We spent another hour talking, or trying to. Every answer Linda gave created 3 more questions. She told us Diane visited every Thursday for almost 5 years, always alone, always ordering coffee and apple pie. Sometimes she'd sit in the same booth for hours writing in notebooks. Other times she'd leave after 10 minutes. Did she ever tell you what she was doing? Linda smiled. She called it homework. Homework? That's all she'd ever say. Walter laughed quietly. Sounds like Diane. Before leaving, Linda reached beneath the counter one last time. I almost forgot. She handed me an old Polaroid photograph. It showed Diane standing beside the Chevelle. The picture had clearly been taken while we were restoring it. She was covered in grease, smiling from ear to ear. I smiled too. I remember this day. Then my smile faded. Someone else was standing beside her. A woman I'd never seen before, about Diane's age. Dark hair tucked beneath a baseball cap. She had one arm around Diane's shoulder. The 2 of them looked like old friends. I turned the picture over. Only one sentence was written on the back. Trust her when the time comes. No name. Nothing else. I looked at Linda. Who's she? Linda slowly shook her head. I don't know. You've never seen her? Only once. When? The day this picture was taken. Walter stared at the photograph for several seconds. Then his eyes widened. No. I looked at him. What? I've seen her. You have? He nodded slowly. Years ago. At a classic car auction in Kansas City. Did you talk to her? No. But Diane did. What happened? Walter frowned. I remember asking Diane who she was. And? She told me, just another car nut. Linda laughed softly. I guess that wasn't true. By the time we left the diner, it was almost noon. Walter followed me in his pickup. We took different roads back toward town, just like Linda suggested. I kept checking my mirrors. No black SUVs. No unfamiliar cars. Maybe Dawson had finally backed off. Maybe. When I pulled into the repair shop, something felt wrong immediately. The front gate was open. I'd locked it that morning. The office door stood halfway open. I parked the truck and ran inside. Nothing looked stolen. Cash drawer untouched. Toolboxes still locked. The Chevelle sat exactly where I'd left it. Then I heard Tyler's voice. Dad? He walked out of the office. You okay? I looked around. Somebody was here. Tyler frowned. What do you mean? The gate. The office. He hesitated. I thought maybe you forgot. I never forget. He looked uncomfortable. Actually, there was a guy asking for you. My stomach tightened. What guy? He wouldn't give his name. What did he want? He asked if you'd found anything inside the car. I froze. What did you tell him? I said no. Tyler shrugged. I figured he was another collector. What did he look like? Tall, gray jacket, maybe 60. I've never seen him before. That wasn't Dawson, this was someone else. That evening after Tyler went home, I searched the office. Every drawer, every cabinet. Nothing appeared to be missing. Until I noticed Diane's old toolbox. It sat exactly where she'd left it 3 years earlier, covered in dust. I hadn't opened it since the funeral. Slowly, I lifted the lid. Everything inside looked untouched. Her favorite ratchet, old measuring tape, mechanic's gloves, a small notebook. I picked it up. Blank. At least, it looked blank. Then I noticed faint writing on the first page, almost invisible, as if it had been written with disappearing ink. I held the page toward the desk lamp. Letters slowly appeared. Only one sentence. The light reveals what memory hides. Before I could figure out what it meant, the shop phone rang. Not my cell phone, the old landline. Hardly anyone still used it. I answered. This is Morrison Auto Repair. A calm voice answered. Mr. Morrison. It was Michael Dawson. I've been very patient. I said nothing. He continued. But patience has limits. What do you want? I want to make you one final offer. The car isn't for sale. I know. A long pause. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. I'm not buying the car anymore. I'm buying your son's safety. For a second, I couldn't breathe. What did you just say? Dawson's voice stayed perfectly calm. Tyler left the shop about 15 minutes ago. He's driving his blue Ford F-150. He'll reach Highway 60 in approximately 3 minutes. I ran toward the front door. What have you done? I haven't done anything. Yet. Bring me what's hidden inside the Chevelle. You have 24 hours. The line went dead. I immediately called Tyler, straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. Then again. Still nothing. As I stood in the empty garage listening to the phone ring, a terrifying thought crossed my mind. Maybe Dawson hadn't been watching the car. Maybe he'd been watching my family. I called Tyler again, straight to voicemail. Again. Nothing. By the 6th call, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I jumped into my pickup and sped toward Highway 60. Every mile felt longer than the last. My eyes searched every shoulder, every ditch, Every abandoned parking lot. Nothing. No blue F-150. No accident. No Tyler. I told myself Dawson was bluffing. He had to be. Then my phone buzzed. A text message. Unknown number. Just 6 words. Stop calling. He's with us. Attached was a photo. Tyler sat in a folding chair inside what looked like an old warehouse. His hands weren't tied. There wasn't a single bruise on his face. But 2 men stood behind him. One rested a hand on Tyler's shoulder. Not friendly. Not threatening. Just enough to make the point. They had him. I slammed on the brakes and pulled onto the shoulder. For a long moment, I couldn't think. Then another message appeared. Drive back to your shop. Wait for instructions. I wanted to call the police. Every instinct screamed at me to do it. But another text arrived before I could. If law enforcement gets involved, your son disappears. I stared at the words. Dawson knew exactly what I was thinking. When I got back to the shop, Walter was already waiting. One look at my face and he knew. It's Tyler. I nodded. They took him. I showed him the photo. Walter's jaw tightened. Call the sheriff. I can't. You have to. He said they'll kill him. Walter paced across the garage. Damn it. This was never supposed to happen. I looked at him. What does that mean? He stopped walking, then slowly sat down on an old shop stool. It means Diane planned for a lot of things. But not this. One look at my face and he knew. It's Tyler. I nodded. They took him. I showed him the photo. Walter's jaw tightened. Call the sheriff. I can't. You have to. He said they'll kill him. Walter paced across the garage. Damn it. This was never supposed to happen. I looked at him. What does that mean? He stopped walking, then slowly sat down on an old shop stool. It means Diane planned for a lot of things. But not this. Not diary entries, not letters. Directions, dates, phone numbers, license plates, business names. Some pages contained maps. Others listed names beside dollar amounts. Diane hadn't been keeping a journal. She'd been building a case. Near the middle of the notebook, one page caught my attention. At the top was a single name, Michael Dawson beneath it. A handwritten note, not his real name. Walter leaned closer. What? I pointed. He lied about his name. The next line read, works for someone called Whitmore. Another name, another mystery. At the bottom of the page, Diane had underlined one sentence twice. Never negotiate with Dawson. He never makes the final decision. Just then, Linda burst through the shop door. She looked completely out of breath. I drove here as fast as I could. What happened? She held up her cell phone. I got this 30 minutes ago. It was another photograph. The same warehouse. The same chair. Only this time, the picture wasn't Tyler. It was me. Walking into Wilson's diner that morning. Someone had been watching us. They're tracking all of us, Linda whispered. Walter nodded, which means there's a leak. The room fell silent. Someone inside Diane's circle had betrayed her. The question was, who? Rick walked in from the garage. You guys okay? Walter immediately closed the notebook. Everything's fine. Rick looked around. Fine? You all look like somebody died. After he walked away, Linda quietly said, we can't trust anyone. Walter nodded. Not until we know who's feeding Dawson information. I hated the thought. Rick had worked with me for 15 years. He felt like family, but so had everyone else Diane trusted, and someone had sold her secrets. Around sunset, Dawson called again. This time I put him on speaker. You've had a busy day. He sounded almost cheerful. What do you want? The same thing I've always wanted. I don't know what you're looking for. I think you do. I don't. There was a pause, Then he calmly said, "Open Diane's notebook." My blood froze. He knew about the notebook. Walter slowly looked at me. Linda's face turned pale. Dawson continued, "Page 32. With trembling hands, I flipped through the notebook. Page 32 contained only one line. Deposit box 47. Nothing else, no bank name, no address. Just those 3 words. "You see it?" Dawson asked. "Yes." "Good. Now we're making progress." He hung up. Walter grabbed the notebook. 47? He whispered. Then he suddenly looked at the brass coin lying on my desk. The one Diane had left with him. The falcon. The number 47. His eyes widened. "The coin. It isn't just a keepsake. It's a key." Linda stared at him. "A key to what?" Walter slowly smiled. "I think I finally know." Before he could explain, the lights inside the shop went out. Everything went black. The air compressors stopped. The office computers shut down. Outside, the security lights died one by one. The entire property was swallowed by darkness. Then, headlights appeared at the end of the driveway. One pair, then another, then another. 5 black SUVs rolled slowly toward the garage. Their engines idled in perfect unison. Walter whispered, "They're here." I looked around the dark shop. There were only 3 of us. No police, no backup. Just an old mechanic, a retired car judge, a diner waitress, and somewhere out there, my son. The lead SUV stopped 20 feet from the garage door. Its headlights remained on, blinding us. The driver's door opened. Michael Dawson stepped out. He wasn't carrying a briefcase this time. He was carrying a shotgun. He looked straight at me and called out, "Jack, your 24 hours just became 24 minutes. Michael Dawson stood in the glare of the SUV headlights, the shotgun hanging loosely in his hands. He didn't point it at us. He didn't have to. The message was clear. "I don't want to fight," he called out. "I want what's mine." Walter stepped in front of me. "It doesn't belong to you." Dawson smiled. "It never belonged to Diane either." Linda quietly whispered, "Don't answer him." I wasn't planning to, but there was one question I couldn't ignore. "What exactly are you looking for?" His smile widened. "The same thing your wife stole 6 years ago." "I told you she didn't steal anything." "No?" He tilted his head. "Then why did she spend the last years of her life hiding it?" I didn't have an answer, because I didn't know. Dawson slowly took another step. The notebook. The coin. The key. They all lead to the same place. Walter's expression changed. "You know about the coin?" "I've known about it longer than you have." He looked directly at Walter. "Diane trusted the wrong people." Walter clenched his fists. "No. She trusted the right ones. That's why you're still looking." Dawson chuckled. For now, a distant siren echoed somewhere across town. Dawson looked toward the highway, then back at us. "You've got 1 hour. If I don't have what's inside deposit box 47, your son disappears." He climbed back into the SUV. Within seconds, all 5 vehicles turned around and disappeared into the darkness. They hadn't come to attack. They'd come to remind us they were in control. Walter closed the garage door. Linda locked it from the inside. For several seconds, no one spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. "What is deposit box 47? Walter looked down at the brass coin in his hand. "I think I know." He flipped it over. The falcon caught the light. "The number isn't random." "It never was." Linda frowned. "So where's the box?" Walter took a deep breath. "First National Bank." The bank had been in Springfield longer than any of us could remember. A red brick building with marble floors and heavy steel vaults. Walter explained that years ago, before electronic keycards became common, the bank used brass tokens for its private deposit boxes. Customers carried matching numbered coins. "The coin isn't the key," Walter said. It's proof you own the key. So Diane rented a safe deposit box? I think so. But why hide it? Because she didn't want anyone finding it. The bank opened at 9 the next morning. None of us slept. Instead, we waited inside the repair shop until sunrise. Every passing vehicle made us look through the window. Every phone vibration made my heart race. Still no word from Tyler. Just before 8. My phone buzzed. Another photo. Tyler was still alive. This time he held up today's newspaper, proof the picture was current. Underneath it was a message. 1 hour left. Walter drove separately again. Linda followed behind us. When we reached First National Bank, the parking lot was nearly empty. Inside, everything looked ordinary. Customers waited in line. A security guard sipped coffee near the entrance. Nobody had any idea what was happening. Walter slid the brass coin across the counter. Her smile disappeared. She picked it up carefully, then looked at Walter. I'll need to get the manager. 5 minutes later, an older gentleman in a navy suit approached us. He didn't introduce himself. He simply looked at the coin, then at me. You must be Mr. Morrison. I stared at him. You know who I am? He nodded. Diane told me you'd eventually come. Another person, another secret. She left instructions. He motioned for us to follow him. The vault was deep beneath the bank. Massive steel doors protected rows upon rows of deposit boxes. The manager stopped in front of one marked 47. He inserted his master key, then looked at me. The second key? Walter handed me a small envelope. Inside was the tiny brass key we'd found behind the glove compartment. My hands trembled as I slid it into the lock. The box clicked open. Inside, there wasn't cash, or jewelry, or documents. There was only one item. A VHS cassette. The label read, "Play before opening any other box." I frowned. What other box? The manager quietly cleared his throat. There isn't just one. He pointed farther down the vault. Rows of deposit boxes stretched into the distance, each marked with a different number. He looked at me. Mrs. Morrison rented 12. Before I could process that, the manager handed me another envelope. This was left with strict instructions. Only you were allowed to read it. I opened it. Inside was another handwritten letter. Jack, if you've reached box 47, then Tyler is probably in danger. I stopped reading. How could she know? I continued. Listen carefully. Do not give anyone what's inside these boxes, not even the FBI. Someone inside the investigation cannot be trusted. A chill ran down my spine. Even the FBI? Who exactly had Diane been fighting? Suddenly, Walter looked toward the vault entrance. His expression hardened. We've got company. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, fast, purposeful. Linda quietly reached inside her purse. A man in a dark suit rounded the corner. Not Dawson, someone I'd never seen before. He held up a leather wallet. Inside was a federal badge. FBI. He looked directly at me. Mr. Morrison? My name is Special Agent Emily Carter. She glanced at the open deposit box, then quietly said the one sentence that changed everything. I'm here because your wife asked me to find you. Walter instinctively stepped in front of me. Linda slipped her hand into her purse where I knew she kept a small revolver. The woman stopped several feet away and slowly raised both hands. I'm not here to fight. She removed her FBI credentials and placed them on a nearby table. My name is Emily Carter. I've been with the Bureau for 14 years. I'm also the last person Diane Morrison trusted. I stared at her. That's a pretty big claim. She nodded. I expected you to say that. I expected you to say that. Then she reached into her jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. You'll recognize this. I unfolded it carefully. The paper was yellowed with age. The handwriting stopped me cold. It was Diane's. Just 3 lines. Emily, If Jack ever reaches box 47, tell him I'm sorry. He'll understand someday. I closed my eyes for a moment. Every new clue made me realize how much of her life I'd never known. Walter looked at Emily carefully. If Diane trusted you, why wait until now? Emily sighed. Because she told me not to contact Jack unless he found the first deposit box. What if he never found it? Then my job was simple. Watch. For how long? As long as it took. Linda shook her head. That's impossible. Emily gave a tired smile. I've been watching this family for 6 years. I looked at her in disbelief. You've been watching us? Protecting you. There's a difference. She opened a slim folder and spread several photographs across the table. I recognized my repair shop, the diner, my house, the Chevelle. There were pictures taken years apart. I know this looks strange, Emily said, but every time Dawson's people got close, we moved them away. Walter frowned. You've known about Dawson this whole time? She nodded. We've known about him, but not the man giving the orders. You mean Whitmore? Emily's expression changed. So you've already seen the notebook? I nodded. She looked relieved. Good. That saves us weeks. The bank manager quietly excused himself, leaving us alone inside the vault. Emily picked up the VHS tape from box 47. This isn't the real reason Diane rented these boxes. Then why did she? Emily smiled. To waste time. I frowned. What? Diane knew someone would eventually find one of the boxes. So she created a maze. 12 deposit boxes. Dozens of fake leads. Letters. Maps. Recordings. Everything was designed to slow them down. Walter laughed softly. That sounds exactly like her. Emily nodded. It worked. Dawson spent 6 years chasing clues and never found the real evidence. I leaned against the vault wall. Where is the real evidence? Emily looked directly at me. I don't know. Silence filled the room. You don't know? If I knew, I would have arrested Whitmore years ago. So Diane never told you? Emily slowly shook her head. No one knew everything. Not Walter. Not Linda. Not me. Not even Diane's lawyer. She split the truth into pieces. Just like Walter had said, no one person held the entire puzzle. Emily pointed toward the remaining deposit boxes. We don't have time to open all of these. Why not? She looked at her watch. Because Dawson already knows you're here, almost on cue. Her phone buzzed. She looked down. Her face immediately hardened. What is it? They've entered the bank. Walter turned toward the vault entrance. How many? At least 8. Armed? Emily nodded. They're dressed like customers. But they're carrying concealed weapons. Linda looked around. Can we lock the vault? The manager already did, Emily replied. But that door won't stop them for long. She reached inside her jacket. Instead of pulling out a weapon, she removed a small flash drive. Diane gave me this 3 years ago. You said you didn't know where the evidence was. I don't. This isn't the evidence. What is it? A list. A list of every place Diane wanted you to visit. I stared at the tiny drive. Why didn't you give it to me before? Because she made me promise. Only after box 47. A loud bang echoed through the vault. Someone was hitting the massive steel door. Another bang, then another. The sound rolled through the room like thunder. Walter whispered, "They're here." Emily stayed surprisingly calm. She walked over to another section of the vault and pressed her hand against the wall. A hidden panel quietly slid open. I blinked. What? The bank manager appeared from inside the narrow passage. I was hoping we'd never have to use this. Emily smiled. Emergency exit? He nodded. Built during the Cold War. Walter laughed. How many secret rooms does this town have? No idea, the manager answered, but this one's real. We hurried through the narrow tunnel. The passage smelled of damp concrete. After nearly 200 feet, we climbed a metal staircase that ended behind an abandoned warehouse across the street from the bank. As soon as we stepped outside, we heard shouting. Black SUVs surrounded the front entrance of First National Bank. Dawson's men poured inside. They were too late. Emily looked back toward the bank. He'll figure it out in 5 minutes. So what now? I asked. She handed me the flash drive. Now, we find Diane's final hiding place. Before we could leave, my cell phone rang. Unknown number. Emily immediately shook her head. Don't answer. But I already knew who it was. I pressed the speaker button. This is Jack, Michael Dawson chuckled. I have to admit, I'm impressed. You've stayed alive longer than I expected. What do you want? I think you know. I don't have it. I know. His voice became quieter, which means Diane fooled all of us. There was a long pause. Then he said something unexpected. I'm starting to admire your wife. Even Emily looked surprised. Dawson continued. But admiration has limits. I've been honest with you. Now it's your turn. He took a slow breath. Your son wants to say hello. A few seconds later, Tyler's voice came over the phone. Dad? You okay? I'm fine. They haven't hurt me. Relief washed over me. Before I could say another word, the phone was taken away. Dawson came back on the line. You've got 48 hours. After that, I stopped being polite. The call ended. Emily looked at me. He's bluffing. You sure? She nodded. If Dawson knew where the evidence was, he wouldn't need Tyler. Walter folded the old road map across the hood of his truck. The flash drive, he said. Can you open it? Emily smiled. I already did. What was on it? She pointed to one location blinking on her laptop screen, an abandoned railroad depot, nearly 60 miles outside Springfield. Beneath the coordinates, Diane had typed just 4 words. The journey starts here. For the first time, it felt like we weren't just reacting anymore. We were finally catching up to the plan Diane had started years before. We climbed into our vehicles and headed toward the old railroad depot, completely unaware that someone inside our own group had already sent Dawson our destination. The abandoned railroad depot sat just outside the small town of Ash Grove. It had once been one of the busiest freight stops in southwest Missouri. Now, nature had almost reclaimed it. Broken windows lined the brick building. Rust covered the old railroad tracks. Weeds pushed through the cracked concrete platform. If Diane wanted to hide something, it was the perfect place. Emily parked her SUV nearly a quarter-mile away. We walk from here. Walter looked around. Anybody following us? Emily checked a small GPS tracker. Not that I can see. Still, none of us felt comfortable. Someone had leaked our location before. There was no reason to think they wouldn't do it again. As we approached the depot, I noticed something strange. Every exterior door had been welded shut. Walter ran his hand across the rusted metal. This wasn't done by the railroad. No, Emily agreed. It was done recently. Why? To make people think the building's inaccessible. Walter smiled. So naturally, Diane found another way in. Emily pointed toward an old drainage tunnel beneath the loading platform. There. The tunnel was narrow and damp. Cold water trickled along the concrete floor. After crawling nearly 50 yards, we reached an iron ladder. It led into the basement of the depot. Emily pushed against a wooden hatch. It opened with a loud creak. Dust floated through the air as sunlight streamed inside. The basement was enormous. Old crates were stacked against the walls. Broken machinery filled one corner. But something immediately caught my attention. Fresh footprints. Someone had been here recently. Walter crouched beside the tracks. 3 people, he said. Maybe 4. How can you tell? Different boot sizes. He pointed toward one set. This one was made today. Emily slowly drew her pistol. We're not alone. We searched the building room by room. The depot looked abandoned, but every now and then, we found signs that someone had been living here. A sleeping bag, empty water bottles, fresh flashlight batteries. Whoever had been here had left in a hurry. Then, I noticed an old wooden ticket counter. Its surface was covered in decades of dust. Except for one spot, a clean handprint. I pressed against the counter. Nothing. Walter walked over. Diane loved hidden latches. He tapped along the wooden trim. On the 3rd tap, something clicked. The entire counter slowly slid sideways. Behind it was a narrow staircase leading underground. Walter smiled. I miss that woman. The staircase ended at a heavy steel door. Unlike everything else in the depot, it wasn't rusty. It looked brand new. Emily examined the lock. No keypad. No electronic access. Just a key. I reached into my pocket. The tiny brass key from the Chevelle. It fit perfectly. The lock clicked. The door slowly opened. Inside was a workshop. Not a bunker. Not a secret office. A workshop. Workbenches lined the walls. Shelves were filled with engine parts. Blueprints hung from corkboards. Half-disassembled radios covered one table. It looked exactly like the kind of place Diane would have loved. Only one thing seemed out of place. In the center of the room sat an old film projector. Beside it rested a metal film canister. A note was taped to the lid. Jack, it's finally time. I loaded the film into the projector. The machine rattled to life. A white screen slowly lit up. Then, there she was. Not a recording on a cassette. Not just her voice. It was Diane. Alive. Smiling. She was standing in this very workshop. Hi, Jack. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. If you're watching this, I guess my little scavenger hunt worked. She laughed. I know. You probably hated every minute of it. Walter quietly smiled. She's right, Diane continued. I owe you an apology. I lied. More times than I can count. I hated doing it, but it was the only way to keep you safe. She walked toward the camera. I know you've met Emily by now. Emily lowered her eyes. I also know you've probably met Michael Dawson. She paused. But Dawson isn't the real enemy. We've been chasing the wrong man. I looked at Emily. She nodded. I know. The film continued. The man behind everything is Charles Whitmore. He owns businesses all across the country. Construction, real estate, shipping, banking. But that's only what people see. The truth is much darker. Diane held up a photograph. It showed Whitmore shaking hands with several powerful-looking executives. The people standing beside him call themselves the board. They've spent decades destroying family-owned businesses, taking land, buying judges, paying politicians. They don't steal with guns. They steal with paperwork. They've ruined hundreds of families. Then she smiled sadly. They almost ruined ours. I frowned. Ours? The film answered immediately. Jack, you've always believed we bought the repair shop. We didn't. The original owner gave it to us. He knew he was going bankrupt because of Whitmore. He asked me to promise we'd keep it alive. I've carried that promise ever since. I looked around the room. I never knew. Not once in 34 years. The film reached its end. Diane looked straight into the camera. If you've made it this far, then Tyler is probably in danger. I'm sorry. I tried so hard to keep him out of this. She took a deep breath. The evidence you're looking for isn't here. Walter groaned. I knew it. Diane smiled. I know. You were hoping this would be easy. It never is. She pointed toward the wall behind her. Open the last locker. The screen went white. The projector clicked to a stop. We all turned toward the back wall. There were 12 steel lockers. 11 were empty. The last one remained locked. I used the brass key again. Inside was a leather duffel bag, nothing else. I unzipped it. Stacks of cassette tapes, hard drives, photo negatives, financial ledgers, and one thick envelope. Across the front, Diane had written, "If you're holding this, don't trust the person standing closest to you." My heart pounded. Standing closest to me was Emily. I slowly looked up. She noticed the expression on my face. What? I handed her the envelope. She read the first line, then quietly closed her eyes. I was afraid of this. Walter immediately stepped back. Linda reached for her revolver. Emily slowly raised both hands. I can explain. Before she could say another word, a gunshot echoed through the depot. The window behind us exploded. Glass flew across the room. Then another shot, and another. Someone outside shouted, "Nobody leaves alive." Emily looked toward the shattered window. Her face turned pale. "They found us." Walter looked at me. "No," he whispered. "They were brought here." The first bullet shattered the workshop window. Glass exploded across the floor. "Down!" Emily shouted. We dove behind the nearest workbench as 2 more shots ripped through the room. Walter crawled toward the steel door and peeked outside. There are at least 8 of them. "Can you see Dawson?" Walter shook his head. "No, but they're organized. They know exactly where we are." Emily looked at me. "They didn't find us. They were sent." Her eyes drifted toward the duffel bag. Diane was right. There really is a leak. The gunfire stopped. A voice echoed through the depot. "Jack Morrison!" It was Michael Dawson. "I know you found the evidence. Walk outside, and I'll let your son go." Emily whispered, "Don't answer." I stayed silent. Dawson continued, "You've got 60 seconds." Walter quietly loaded the old revolver he'd brought from home. "I've only got 6 rounds. Linda checked her pistol. "I've got 9. Emily pulled an extra magazine from her jacket. "Make every shot count." I looked around the workshop. There had to be another way out. Diane always planned escape routes. Always. Then I noticed something on the blueprint wall. A hand-drawn floor plan. One section was circled in red. Freight tunnel. Walter smiled. "Of course." Emily unfolded the blueprint. "The tunnel runs beneath the tracks. Where does it come out?" She traced the line. "About 300 yards into the woods." Linda looked toward the steel door. "They'll see us." Emily shook her head. "Not if they think we're still inside." Walter grabbed an old toolbox from one of the shelves. "What are you doing?" He grinned. "Creating a distraction." Inside the toolbox were greasy shop rags and 2 cans of paint thinner. Within seconds, he'd soaked the rags and stuffed them beneath a workbench. Emily handed him a road flare. "You always carry one?" Walter smiled. "I'm an old mechanic. I carry everything." He lit the flare and tossed it into the pile. Flames erupted almost instantly. Dark smoke filled the workshop. Outside, Dawson's men began shouting, "They're burning the place down. Move!" Their attention shifted toward the smoke. Exactly what Walter wanted. We slipped into the freight tunnel. The narrow passage twisted beneath the depot. The air smelled damp and stale. Behind us, the fire alarms echoed through the building. Halfway through the tunnel, Emily suddenly stopped. She crouched beside the wall. "What is it?" She pointed toward fresh footprints. Someone had used this tunnel recently. Very recently. Then she found something lying on the ground, a silver lighter, engraved with 2 letters. E.C. Walter looked confused. Emily Carter. She stared at the lighter. I lost this 3 days ago. Silence. Someone had been following her. We emerged deep inside the woods. Smoke rose above the trees where the depot stood. Sirens echoed in the distance. For a moment, it looked like we'd escaped. Then an engine started nearby. A black pickup burst through the trees and skidded to a stop. Michael Dawson stepped out. He smiled. I knew she'd find the tunnel. Emily's face hardened. You've known about this place all along. No, he replied. I followed the only person who could lead me here. He looked directly at Emily. You. No, Emily whispered. That's impossible. Dawson tossed the silver lighter onto the hood of the truck. You dropped this while watching my office last week. You've been carrying a tracker ever since. Emily reached into the lining of her FBI jacket. Hidden inside, she found a tiny GPS transmitter no bigger than a shirt button. She stared at it in disbelief. They planted it. Walter sighed. Which means nobody betrayed us. They simply tracked us. For the first time in days, it felt like we could breathe again. Diane's team hadn't turned against one another after all. Whitmore's people had simply stayed one step ahead. Dawson slowly opened the truck's rear door. Tyler climbed out. His hands weren't tied, but one guard stood close behind him with a pistol. Dad, I'm okay. Relief hit me so hard my knees almost gave out. Dawson looked at me. I kept my promise. I didn't hurt him. He looked toward the duffel bag. Now keep yours. Emily quietly whispered, Don't do it. Tyler shook his head. Dad, don't. I looked at the bag, then at my son. Every instinct told me to hand it over. What good was evidence if Tyler didn't survive? Then I remembered something Diane had once told me during the Chevelle restoration. If someone forces you to choose between fear and what's right, fear usually asks you to decide quickly. She was right. Dawson had been rushing us since the beginning. Deadlines, threats, ultimatums. He wanted panic, not thought. I looked him straight in the eyes. I'm not giving it to you. Tyler's eyes widened. So did Dawson's. For the first time, he looked genuinely surprised. Then something unexpected happened. Dawson sighed, not in frustration, in resignation. He slowly lowered his weapon. I was hoping you'd say that. Everyone froze. What? I asked. He looked past me, toward the trees. They're here. Black SUVs poured onto the dirt road from every direction. Not Dawson's vehicles. New ones, larger, more heavily armed. Men in black tactical gear surrounded the clearing within seconds. Their leader stepped out of the first SUV, an older man with silver hair and a tailored black coat. He didn't even glance at Dawson. Instead, he looked directly at me. So, he said calmly, you're Jack Morrison. Dawson lowered his head slightly, almost like an employee greeting his boss. Emily's voice barely rose above a whisper. Charles Whitmore, the real man behind everything, had finally arrived. The clearing fell silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Charles Whitmore stood beside his black SUV with his hands folded behind his back. He looked more like the CEO of a Fortune 500 company than the head of a criminal empire. His tailored coat didn't have a speck of dust on it. His polished shoes looked out of place on the muddy forest road. He smiled politely. So, you're the man Diane fell in love with. I stared at him. You knew my wife? Whitmore chuckled. I respected her. Emily scoffed. No, you feared her. Whitmore's smile faded. Fear is an emotional word. I prefer caution. Dawson stood quietly behind him. Gone was the confident negotiator. Now he looked like an employee waiting for instructions. Whitmore never looked at him. He didn't have to. Everyone already knew who was in charge. Tyler remained beside one of the guards. His hands were free, but 2 rifles were pointed at him. Whitmore noticed me looking. Relax. If I wanted your son dead, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I clenched my fists. What do you want? The duffel bag. You'll never get it. He smiled. Oh. I think I will. Whitmore slowly walked closer. Diane spent 6 years trying to destroy everything I built. You make it sound like she failed. His smile widened. Didn't she? I looked at the duffel bag. Depends what's inside. Whitmore laughed. I know exactly what's inside. Financial records. Shipping manifests. Shell companies. Names. But that's not what matters. Emily frowned. Then what does? Whitmore looked directly at me. The original ledger. Walter whispered. The ledger? Whitmore nodded. The only document proving who actually owns every company we created. I looked confused. I thought the files in this bag were the evidence. Whitmore shook his head. No. They're copies. The real evidence, and never left Diane's hands. I felt my stomach drop. So all of this, the Chevelle, the deposit boxes, the workshop, it was all a distraction. Whitmore smiled. Exactly. For 6 years, I chased ghosts. I searched 12 states. I bought judges. I bribed investigators. I even hired Dawson. And all the while, Diane was laughing at me. Emily smiled for the first time. Sounds like her. Whitmore didn't smile back. She was extraordinary, which is exactly why she had to disappear. The words hit me like a freight train. What did you just say? Whitmore sighed. Diane wasn't supposed to die. Silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. He continued quietly. The cancer was real, but we didn't cause it. We simply stopped trying to save her. Emily's eyes filled with anger. You monster. Whitmore shrugged. Business. Before I could charge at him, Walter grabbed my arm. Jack. Not yet. I could barely hear him. Every word Whitmore spoke echoed inside my head. He knew. He knew Diane was dying, and he let it happen. Whitmore looked almost sympathetic. She knew Jack. What? She knew I wouldn't kill her. Because dying naturally made me invisible. You expect me to believe that? You don't have to. He nodded toward Emily. Ask your FBI agent. Emily lowered her head. Whitmore looked toward Tyler. Enough history. Give me the bag. I looked at my son, then at the duffel bag. Every instinct screamed at me to trade it. Emily quietly whispered, Trust Diane. Walter nodded. So do I. Slowly, unzipped the bag. Whitmore smiled. There we go. Instead of handing him the files, I pulled out the thick envelope Diane had labeled. Don't trust the person standing closest to you. I opened it. Inside was one final handwritten letter. Jack, if Whitmore is standing in front of you, then I won. I blinked. Whitmore frowned. I kept reading. Because the only reason he'd ever reveal himself is if he believed he'd already won. Emily smiled. Walter started laughing. Whitmore's expression hardened. I continued. He'll demand the bag. He'll threaten Tyler. He'll tell you the evidence isn't real. He's lying. Every word. Whitmore shouted, Enough. I ignored him. The real evidence isn't hidden. It never was. It's already been delivered. Confusion spread across everyone's face. Even Emily looked surprised. Whitmore took one step forward. What does that mean? I reached the last page, then smiled. For the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. 3 days before my death, Emily mailed identical evidence packages to every major news network in America. Each package was programmed for delayed release. If I failed to cancel the delivery, they were automatically shipped. By the time you read this, the story has already broken. Whitmore's face went completely white. No. Emily slowly reached into her pocket and pulled out her cell phone. She turned the screen toward him. Breaking news alerts flooded the display. Federal corruption investigation expands nationwide secret financial network, exposed multiple CEOs, resign overnight, FBI conducting coordinated raids across 5 states. Walter laughed harder. Diane, you unbelievable woman. At that exact moment, the distant sound of helicopters filled the sky. Whitmore slowly looked upward. 3 helicopters appeared over the tree line. Then 4 more. Dozens of law enforcement vehicles raced toward the clearing from both directions. Emily pressed a button on a small radio clipped to her jacket. This is Agent Carter. Target confirmed. Within seconds, federal agents poured into the clearing. Whitmore's guards raised their rifles. Emily shouted, "Federal agents! Drop your weapons!" Several complied immediately, others didn't. A brief exchange of gunfire erupted. Bullets tore through the trees. I grabbed Tyler and pulled him behind a fallen log. Walter and Linda covered us. Less than 30 seconds later, it was over. The clearing became silent once again. Whitmore stood alone. Handcuffs clicked around his wrists. For the first time, the man looked afraid. As agents led him toward an armored vehicle, he stopped beside me. "You know," he said quietly, "I underestimated your wife." I looked him straight in the eyes. So did everyone else. Whitmore smiled sadly. "That's probably true." He climbed into the vehicle. The door slammed shut. As the convoy pulled away, it finally felt like Diane's war was over. Or so we thought. Because one question still remained unanswered. Back at the repair shop, waiting inside the Chevelle, was one last secret Diane had never told anyone. 3 weeks later, for the first time in months, the Morrison auto repair shop felt normal again. The smell of fresh paint mixed with motor oil. Rick argued with a customer over the price of brake pads. The old radio played classic rock in the background. And Tyler was back under the hood of a pickup truck, complaining about how engineers made simple jobs impossible. I had never been happier to hear someone complain. Life wasn't exactly the way it had been before. But it was finally moving forward. Charles Whitmore never saw freedom again. Within days of his arrest, federal agents raided dozens of offices across the country. More than 80 executives were charged with fraud, bribery, money laundering, and racketeering. Several judges resigned. A handful of politicians quietly disappeared from public office before investigations reached them. Michael Dawson accepted a plea deal. In exchange for his testimony, he revealed everything he knew about Whitmore's organization. It wasn't enough to erase what he'd done, but it helped dismantle what remained of the network. Emily later told me it became one of the largest white-collar criminal investigations in modern history. Diane's evidence had done exactly what she'd hoped. It finished the job. A week after Whitmore's conviction, Emily stopped by the shop. She wasn't wearing an FBI jacket this time, just blue jeans and an old leather coat. She carried a small cardboard box. "I think this belongs to you." Inside were Diane's personal belongings that had been kept as evidence. Her notebook, the brass coin, the tiny key, a faded baseball cap she always wore while sanding body panels, and one small cassette tape. The label simply read, "For home." Emily smiled. "I never listened to this one. It was addressed only to you." Before leaving, she shook my hand. "I wish I'd met Diane before all of this." I smiled. "You would have liked her." Emily laughed. "I think she would have scared me." She had that effect on people. That evening, Tyler and I rolled the Chevelle into the center of the garage. It looked exactly the way Diane had left it. Marina blue paint, chrome polished like a mirror. Not a fingerprint on it. Tyler placed the old cassette into the player we'd repaired weeks earlier. The tape clicked. Then, her voice filled the garage one last time. "Hi, boys. Tyler immediately smiled. So she knew we'd listen together. Of course you are. Jack would never play this without you. I laughed quietly. She's still right. If you're hearing this, everything worked. Which means the world is a little safer. She paused. Good. Now let's stop talking about bad people. The tone of her voice changed. It wasn't the determined investigator we'd been hearing throughout the journey. It was simply Diane, the woman I married. Jack, thank you. For every late night in the garage. For pretending my terrible coffee tasted good. For dancing with me when the radio played songs from high school. For building a life that was never about money. I felt Tyler quietly place a hand on my shoulder. Neither of us spoke. Tyler, if you're listening, I'm proud of the man you've become. Your dad won't always tell you when he's hurting. He thinks fixing things is easier than talking about them. So check on him once in a while. Tyler laughed through tears. She's got you figured out, Dad. Yeah. I guess she always did. The tape continued. Now, about the Chevelle. Both of us looked toward the car. I know someone has probably offered you ridiculous money for it. Don't sell it because it's valuable. Sell it only if your heart tells you it's time. A car isn't metal. It's memories. If keeping it helps you remember, keep it. If letting it go helps someone else build memories, then let it go without guilt. I looked at Tyler. He already knew my answer. The Chevelle wasn't going anywhere. Near the end of the tape, Diane laughed softly. There's one last thing. Remember the glove compartment that kept getting stuck? Tyler grinned. The mice. She laughed again. Exactly. Open it one more time. Tyler reached across the passenger seat and opened the glove compartment. It looked empty. Then he noticed something taped to the roof inside. A small, folded photograph. He carefully peeled it free. It was the very first picture ever taken of us beside the unfinished Chevelle. The paint wasn't done. The engine wasn't installed. The garage was a complete mess. Diane stood between Tyler and me with grease on her face. Someone had written across the bottom in black marker, "Home isn't a place. It's the people who wait for you there." None of us remembered taking that picture, but somehow, it became my favorite. The following Saturday, the town hosted its annual classic car show. For the first time since Diane passed away, I entered the Chevelle, not to compete, just to drive. As we pulled into the fairgrounds, people gathered around the car almost immediately. Some admired the restoration. Others recognized it from the news. A little boy, maybe 10 years old, walked up with his father. He stared at the Chevelle with wide eyes. "Mister, did you really build this?" I smiled. "My wife and I did." He nodded slowly. "I want to build one with my dad someday." His father laughed. "I don't even know where to start." I reached into my toolbox and handed the boy an old socket wrench. It was one Diane had used hundreds of times. "Start with this." His eyes lit up like Christmas morning. That afternoon, the judges announced the awards. The Chevelle won Best Restoration. When they called my name, I walked onto the stage. The crowd applauded. The announcer handed me the trophy. I looked at it for a moment, then shook my head. I appreciate this. But there's someone else who deserves it. I carried the trophy back to the car, opened the driver's door, and gently placed it on the passenger seat, exactly where Diane always sat whenever we took Sunday drives. The crowd stood in silence. Then, one by one, they began to clap again. This time, not for the car, but for the woman who had turned an old pile of rust into a symbol of courage, love, and family. That evening, Tyler and I drove the Chevelle home with the windows down. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. The engine purred exactly the way Diane had tuned it years before. As we turned onto our road, Tyler smiled. "So, think Mom would have liked how everything turned out?" I looked at the empty passenger seat, then at the road ahead. I don't think she'd care about Whitmore, or the FBI, or any of that. What she'd care about is that we're driving home together. Tyler nodded. Yeah, I think you're right. The Chevelle rolled into the driveway just as the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the trees. I shut off the engine. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. The garage door slowly opened. Waiting inside was the same workbench, the same old tools, and the life Diane had helped us build. Some stories end with revenge, others end with justice. Ours ended with something better, a family that survived, a promise that was kept, and one beautiful old Chevelle that would never be for sale.